So we are continuing our family scripture study. We finished up the introduction and the testimony of the 3 and 8 witnesses, and now we are continuing with the testimony of the prophet
That
Joseph
was 12
Smith.
witness.
Yeah, 12 witnesses. And he's going to talk about how he got the gold plates that he translated into the Book of Mormon. Let's do just the first two, and then we'll go 2 at a time each.
Okay. The testimony of the prophet Joseph Smith. Prophet Joseph Smith's own words about the coming forth of the Book of Mormon are: on the evening of the 21st of September, 1823, I betook myself to prayer and supplication and Almighty God.
So what was he doing?
His prayer.
He was praying. That's right.
While I was thus in act of calling upon God, I discovered a light appearing in my room, which continued to increase till the room was lighter than at noonday, when immediately a personage appeared at my bedside, standing in the air, for his feet did not touch the floor.
So what happened? An angel appeared by his bed. Is this the first time he's seen a celestial being?
Yes.
No.
What do we know?
The first vision.
Yeah, and how old was he when he had the first vision?
The Heavenly Father and
How old was he when he saw Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ?
No.
18.
14. And that was in 1820, so this is 1823. So how old is he now? When he's
17.
seeing the angel? 17. Very good. And I'll continue on the next 2. He had on a loose robe of most exquisite whiteness. It was a whiteness beyond anything earthly I had ever seen. Nor did I believe that any earthly thing could be made to appear so exceedingly white and brilliant. His hands were naked, and his arms also a little above the wrist. So also were his feet naked, as were his legs a little above the ankles. His head and neck were also bare. I could discover that he had on no other clothing but this robe, as it was open so that I could see into his bosom. So was this angel wearing really extravagant kind of clothing?
No.
No, it was a very humble robe, but he shone with this really bright light. Let's see what happens next.
I think
Next year.
He called me by name.
Not only.
Not only was his robe exceedingly white, but his whole person was glorious beyond description, and his countenance truly like lightning. The room was exceedingly light, but not so very bright, as immediately around his person, when I first looked upon him, I was afraid, but the fear soon left me. He called me by name and said unto me that he was a messenger sent from the presence of God to me, and that his name was Moroni, that God had work for me to do, and that my name should be had for good and evil among all nations, kindreds and tongues, and that it should be both good and evil spoken among all people.
So, who was this angel?
Moroni.
Moroni. And what did he know about Joseph? He knew his what?
His name?
He knew his name. And what did he tell him about his name?
That will be used for praise and used for destruction.
Kind of, yeah. That people would speak positive. Some people would speak positively about him, and some would say a lot of evil things about Joseph Smith, right? But that his name would be known for either good or evil throughout the entire world. Actually, Moroni was warning Joseph Smith about it, telling him there was a work that he was going to do. Let's continue with the next group.
He said there was a book deposited written upon gold plates, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent and the source from whence they sprang. He also said that the fullness of the everlasting gospel was contained in it, as delivered by the Savior to the ancient inhabitants. Also that there were 2 stones and silver bows, and these stones fastened to a breastplate constituted what is called the Urim and Thummim, deposited with the plates. And the possession and use of these stones were what constituted seers in ancient or former times, and that God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book.
Okay. So what was Moroni telling him?
Where the gold plates are.
And
Ah.
the
So he was telling him where the gold plates were, but he was saying with the gold plates were what? The Urim and Thummim. And what did the Urim and Thummim look like?
Clear rocks fastened to a bow like glasses.
Yeah, kind of like glasses. So two stones kind of fastened to a silver bow, so they were probably like glasses. So what did Joseph Smith probably do with this Urim and Thummim?
He held them with his faith, and then read the gold plates.
And he could do
Then
what?
he would be able to do what?
Translating.
To translate the words on the gold plates. Now, let's say somebody else had these two stones and looked at it and held it up to their face. What would they see?
Just rocks.
Right. Would it do anything for just kind of a regular person?
No, they would just say,
Yeah, these are just rocks, and they kind of toss it aside. But because Joseph was called as a prophet, if he held these things up to his face and kind of used it,
you would be able to read it.
because what was he receiving from God when he was translating these gold plates?
The power of the priesthood. The power of God.
It was the power of God, but when God talks to us and gives us information, it's like, oh,
The Holy Ghost.
it could be through the Holy Ghost.
Revelation.
Got it. Revelation.
So
Very
say it starts
good.
with an O.
So these stones probably by themselves didn't do very much, but when God gave them power to his prophet, he used them for Joseph Smith to receive what? Revelation and translate the book. So it shows that things that are just normal and typical, which kind of in and of themselves don't seem like they can do a lot, in the hands of God.
They can do a lot.
Right. And what does that kind of teach us? Are there times where we kind of feel like we don't have a lot to offer, we're just not special, we're just average, and there's not a lot we can do? Can we feel like that sometimes?
Yeah.
Well, what does this kind of Urim and Thummim teach us?
That we can do something
With what?
ourselves.
No, not by ourselves. By
With
ourselves,
God.
we can't do too
With
much.
ourselves and God.
Right. By ourselves, we're just these two stones that in and of themselves can't really do much. But when Heavenly Father is with us, something that's totally normal and average can become what? Really special. That's what this Urim and Thummim
Like
was.
some people think of it as regular. That's something special.
Yeah, anytime God gives his power to something, that thing can become very, very special, and great things can be accomplished, like translating the gold plates. Alright, let's continue on. And you want to do the next two?
Again, he told me that when I brought those plates, of which he had spoken for the time that they should be obtained, was not yet fulfilled. I should not show them to any person, neither the breastplate with the Urim and Thummim, only to those to whom I should be commanded commanded to show them. If I did, I should be destroyed. While he was conversing with me about the plates, the vision was opened to my mind, that I could see the place where the plates were deposited, and that so clearly and distinctly that I knew the place again when I visited.
Okay, so Moroni told him, go get the plates right now.
No,
What? What did he say?
that it wasn't the time yet.
It wasn't time yet. But did he still show him where they were located?
Yeah,
Yeah, he
so
did.
he can know when it is.
So let's see what happens next.
After this communication, I saw the light in the room begin to gather immediately around the person, him who had been speaking to me, and it continued to do so until the room was again left dark, except just around him. When instantly I saw as it were a conduit open right up into heaven, and he ascended to the until he entirely disappeared, and the room was left as it had been before his heavenly light had made its appearance.
So after delivering his message, the angel what?
Left.
Returned back to heaven, right? So that was quite an experience. Let's see what happens for Joseph here after the angel left. I lay musing on the singularity of the scene. This was very unusual, obviously, and he was just kind of awestruck by the whole thing. And I lay musing on the singularity of the scene and marveling greatly at what had been told to me by this extraordinary messenger. When in the midst of my meditation, I suddenly discovered that my room was again beginning to get lighted. And in an instant, as it were, the same heavenly messenger was again by my bedside.
Now that's two.
What? He came back for a second time, and it says he commenced and again related the very same things which he had done at his first visit, without the least variation, which having done, he informed me of great judgments that were coming upon the earth, with great desolations by famine, sword, and pestilence. And we're experiencing some of that right now in terms of kind of disease and pestilence. You know, the coronavirus going on, kind of being holed up here at home. But these are things that have been prophesied in terms of things that would happen in these kind of latter days. And that these grievous judgments would come on the earth in this generation. So Joseph Smith was being told that these things were going to happen. Having related these things, he again ascended as he had done before. So how many times has he appeared?
Two.
2 times in the same night.
He's like Joseph in 2020 or video.
I don't think it was that specific, but just kind of this prophecy that these kinds of things would happen.
I mean, from the time of Joseph till now, there's been a lot of wars and
Like the
famines
Civil War.
And there was the Civil War, a lot of unrest, and just
Oh, there's
throughout,
all the
and that's here in the
war.
States, right? And worldwide, there's been a lot of issues around the sword or warfare, famines across the earth, right? Kind of these things would happen, but in the midst of all of this, God was going to perform a work. In the midst of all these things, let's continue on here and see what that is.
By this time, so deep were the impressions made on my mind, that sleep had fled from my eyes, and I lay overwhelmed in astonishment at what I had both seen and heard. What was my surprise when again I beheld the same messenger at my
How
bedside.
many times was that?
3.
3 times!
3.
And heard him rehearse or repeat over again the same thing as before, and added a caution to me, telling me that Satan would try to tempt me, in consequence of the indigent circumstances of my father's family, to get the place for the purpose of getting rich. This he forbade me, saying that I must not have no other objective in view in getting the place but to glorify God. He must not be influenced by any other motive than that of building his kingdom, otherwise I could not get them.
So what did he add in this 3rd visit?
That Satan tried to tempt him to sell the good things for money or to help his family.
But his family was having some financial difficulty. Wouldn't that be a good thing to make some extra money for the family?
No.
Well, it would, but just not the good.
Yeah.
Exactly.
After the 3rd visit, he again ascended into heaven as before, and I was again left to ponder on the strangeness of what I had just experienced. And almost immediately after the heavenly messenger had ascended from me for the 3rd time, the cock crowed, and I found that day was approaching, so that our interviews must have occupied the whole of the night.
He was up all night.
That was a long night.
But he was staying up for something good.
It was an all-nighter.
Yeah.
I shortly after arose from my bed and as usual went to the necessary labors of the day. But in attempting to work as at other times, I found my strength so exhausted as to render me entirely unable. My father, who was laboring along with me, discovered something to be wrong with me and told me to go home.
You quiet down over there, Elizabeth.
I'm gonna start over.
No, it's fine.
I started with the intention of going to the house, but in attempting to cross the fence out of the field where we were, my strength entirely failed me and I fell helpless on the ground and for a time was quite unconscious of anything.
So what happened to him?
Fainted.
Why? Why was he so tired?
He was up all night.
Yeah. He was so tired that after his dad's like, son, you don't look too good, go back home. He started going back home, and what happened?
He hopped the fence.
Tried to hop the fence, fell down,
And he
and
fell.
just kind of passed out, fainted, fell
It
asleep.
must have hurt when he fell.
Yeah, depends. He was probably okay. Let's see what happens next.
First thing that I can recollect was a voice speaking unto me, calling me by name. I looked up and beheld the same messenger standing over my head.
What?
One time's a charm.
Fourth time's the charm, apparently. This is the fourth time Moroni appears to him the very next morning. And what happens?
I looked up and beheld the same messenger standing over my head, surrounded by light as before. He then again related unto me all that he had related to me the previous night, and commanded me to go to my father and tell him of the vision and commandments which I had received.
So what do you tell him to do?
They go down.
Tell us that. Let's see how his dad reacts to what Joseph is saying here. Okay, you want to do the next two? Maybe?
Yes, I obeyed. I returned to my father in the field and rehearsed the whole matter to him. He replied to me that it was of God, and told me to go and do as commanded by his messenger. I left the field and went to the place where the messenger had told me the plates were deposited, and owing to the distinctness of the vision which I had been concerning it, I knew the place the instant that I arrived there.
So what does Dad say?
They go and do it.
Go and do what the angel said?
Yeah.
That's right. And where did he go?
So where he saw when
Yeah, he went to where the plates were deposited, right?
Mhm.
Alright, what happens next?
Convenient
Convenient.
to the village of Manchester, Ontario County, New York, stands a hill of considerable size and the most elevated of any in the neighborhood. On the west side of this hill, not far from the top, under a stone of considerable size, lay the plates deposited in a stone box. This stone was thick and rounding in the middle, on the upper side, and thinner in the middle on the upper side, and thinner towards the edges, so that the middle part of it was visible above the ground, but the edge all around was covered with earth.
And the next one says, having removed the earth, I obtained a lever, which I got fixed under the edge of the stone, and with little exertion, what?
Raised it up.
Raised it up. So he saw the stone, which the angel showed him in the vision. He dug around it, got a kind of stick underneath it,
And then
and
just
lifted up the stone. Right.
Yeah.
And the stone moves, and what happens? And with a little exertion raised it up. I looked in, and there indeed did I behold the plates, the Urim and Thummim, and the breastplate, as stated by the messenger. The box in which they lay was formed by laying stones together in some kind of cement. In the bottom of the box were laid 2 stones crossways of the box, and on these stones lay the plates, and the other things with them. So when Moroni buried the plates all those years ago, he dug a hole, and he put little kind of tablets of stone inside the hole to turn the hole into like a cement box. Put the plates in there and the Urim and Thummim on the breastplate, and he got a stone, and what did he do? Put it on top of the box so no one could find it, and kind of left it in the Lord's hands until it was time to bring those plates back out. And that's the work that Joseph Smith was called to do. And let's see what he does when he sees the plates in there. The next two, I made.
I made an attempt to take them out, but was forbidden by the messenger, and was again.
Stop! No! Don't grab it! Stop!
Yeah, because what did Moroni tell him?
It wasn't
It's
time.
not time
Wasn't
yet.
time.
Yeah,
He just got probably overly excited,
Yeah,
like,
like-
oh.
I think anybody would have done the same thing.
You would have died.
And was again informed that the time for bringing them forth had not yet arrived, neither would it until 4 years from that time. But he told me that I should come to that place precisely in 1 year from that time, and that he would there meet with me, and I should continue to do so until the time should come for obtaining the place.
So what did Moroni tell him?
In 4 years.
Accordingly as it had been commanded, I went at the end of each year, and at each time I found the same messenger there, and received instruction and intelligence from him at each of our interviews, respecting what the Lord was going to do, and how and in what manners his kingdom was to be conducted in the last days.
Yeah, so he was getting direct instruction and teaching about the work that he was going to have to do once he got the plates. And the next two paragraphs.
At length, the time arrived for obtaining the plates, the Urim and Thummim, and the breastplate. On the 22nd day of September, 1827, having gone as usual at the end of another year to the place where they were deposited, the same heavenly messenger delivered them up to me with this charge, that I should be responsible for them, that if I should let them go carelessly or through any neglect of mine, I should be cut off, but that if I would use all my endeavors to preserve them until he, the messenger, should call for them, they should be protected.
And when he got him, and what was he told when he got him?
Take care of them.
Yeah,
Take care of them.
absolutely, because they're gold plates. A lot of people would be interested
In that,
in having gold plates. Yeah, let's see what happens.
Okay.
he will not be there.
I
He
assume
did not go in
there's so many days. Oh my gosh. No, it was
They do have computers.
Yeah,
All right,
there was
all
no
right, all
eBay.
right, all right. Let's
They
continue.
were
Focus.
Craigslist.
I soon found out the reason why I had received such strict charges to keep them safe, and why it was that the messenger had said that when I had done what was required at my hand, he would call for them. For no sooner was it known that I had them, than the most strenuous exertions were used to get them from me. Every stratagem that could be invented was resorted to for that purpose. The persecution became more bitter and severe than before, and multitudes were on the alert continually to get them from me if possible. But by the wisdom of God, they remained safe in my hands until I had accomplished by them what was required at my hand. When, according to arrangements, the messenger called for them, I delivered them up to him, and he has them in his charge until this day, being the 2nd day of May, 1838.
So what happened?
He translated it and then gave it back to you.
Well, he had to keep them safe while he was
Keep 'em
translating.
safe,
All the
yes.
people kept trying to take him from him, but
Maybe-
he kept them safe.
Maybe he
Completed
hid
the
it
work?
himself.
Yeah, he did all kinds of stuff, I'm sure. And he finished translating, and then what did he do with them? The plates, when he was done
He
translating.
gave it back to Moroni.
Went back to Moroni.
I'll read it.
You want to do it?
Yeah.
Alright, go for it.
The ancient record thus brought forth from the earth as the voice of a people speaking from the dust and translated into modern speech by the gift and power of God, as attested by divine affirmation, and was first published to the world in the year 1837.
So when he finished the
That's what we have
translation, it got published and became what?
A book of
Which we
Mormon.
have now. So what were actually on the plates that Joseph Smith translated? So are the gold plates just one single book written by one person?
No.
Or is it like a whole bunch of books all sitting together?
It's a whole bunch of books.
It's a whole bunch of books that are all sitting together in this kind of volume set,
And then I'm going to read the brief explanation.
which kind of tells you what
We used to have a little
Records.
post-it of that.
were included here in the gold plates. Alright, so I guess it's my turn. The Book of Mormon is a sacred record of peoples in ancient America and was engraved upon metal plates. Sources from which this record was compiled include the following. 1. The plates of Nephi. This was one section of the book plates. And the plates of Nephi were of two kinds, the small plates and the large plates. The former, the small plates, were more particularly devoted to spiritual matters and the ministry and teachings of the prophets, while the latter, the large plates, were occupied mostly by a secular history of the peoples concerned. From the time of Mosiah, or the Book of Mosiah and the Book of Mormon, from the time of Mosiah, however, the large plates also included items of major spiritual importance. So the plates of Nephi were divided into two parts. What were they?
Small plates and the large plates.
And what was the difference?
Small plates for spiritual stuff.
And the large plates were books.
More stuff, history stuff, just kind of the leaders and kind of the genealogy, that sort of thing.
And a little bit of sweet.
Yeah, that's right. So that was the plates of Nephi, which were written by the prophet Nephi. But what other records were included in these gold plates?
One, the next one, I think.
Sure. The plates of Mormon, which consist of an abridgment by Mormon from the large plates of Nephi, with many commentaries. These plates also contained a continuation of the history by Mormon and additions by his son Moroni.
So all of these ancient records of the prophets here in the Americas a long time ago, they were on these plates, and who kind of summarized all these records together?
Mormon.
Mormon did. And after he summarized all these plates and the plates of Nephi, what did he do? Not yet. What did he do? He added
His own summary.
his own history, his own summary of what was going on during his day, and those are known as the plates of what?
Mormon.
Mormon. So Mormon does that, completes it, and then he passes it on to Moroni. And what does Moroni do?
3. The plates of Ether, which present a history of the Jaredites. This record was abridged by Moroni, who inserted comments of his own and incorporated the record with the general history under the title Book of Ether.
So Moroni saw, like, oh, my dad didn't include this Jaredite history in his plates. I'm going to go ahead and summarize the Jaredite history, and he added that, and that's known as what?
The plates of Ether.
The plates of Ether. And he also added some of his own teachings as well, and kind of summarized it. So we have the Book of Ether in there also, and he adds some of his own words. And what's the other, number 4, the other set of scriptures that's in there?
Or the plates of brass brought by the people of Lehi from Jerusalem in 600 BC. These contain the 5 books of the Moses, and also a record of the Jews from the beginning down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, and also the prophecies of the holy prophets. Many quotations from these plates citing Isaiah and other biblical and non-biblical prophets appear in the Book of Mormon.
So this one's a little tricky, right? Because you gotta have to like picture a timeline in your mind, okay? So you with me?
That's the thing. That's why I need to keep reading all the time because I forget.
You gotta have like a timeline to understand the plates of brass. So, the
Need for
people-
all the plates.
the plates of Nephi talk about the people who lived here in the Americas. Were they born here in the Americas though? Where was Nephi and his family? Where were they from? Jerusalem, which is in the Middle East, in Israel, right? So they were in Jerusalem, and God brought them out of Jerusalem across the ocean to where? Which is where? The Americas, right? And when did that happen?
A long time ago.
When specifically? Yeah. 600 BC. So 600 years before Christ was born. Okay? But were there prophets who lived even before then, who were even more ancient prophets? Like Moses lived. Yes? Hi? Moses lived like 1,300 years before Christ. Abraham was before that. Isaiah and Jeremiah were like 700 years before Christ. So all of these prophets wrote down their teachings, right, Alyssa? speaking of down, they wrote down their teachings, and when Nephi and his family came to the Americas, what did they bring with them?
The plates.
The plates of what?
Brass.
And what was written on the plates of brass?
The past stuff.
The past stuff, the past prophets' teachings, like Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, they brought all of those teachings with them so they could teach the scriptures to their kids. Where do we have the teachings of Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah?
The Old Testament.
The Old Testament, correct, in the Bible. So we have the Old Testament. Their copy of the Old Testament, though, was written on what?
Brass.
Plates of brass, right? But they left 600 years before Christ. For example, our Old Testament has teachings of Malachi in it, who lived about 400 years before Christ. Did the plates of brass have the teachings of Malachi on it, like our Old Testament does?
No.
Why?
Because he was born closer to when Jesus was.
So when Malachi was born in Israel and did his revelations, were Nephi and his family even in Israel anymore?
No.
No, they had already come here to the Americas, right? So their Old Testament only goes to 600 BC, but our Old Testament goes all the way up to kind of 450 years before Christ with Malachi, and then it ends there. So even though they didn't have the teachings of these other prophets, they received revelation themselves, wrote the revelations they received just like Malachi did, and they kept a record on those called the plates of what? Brass.
So they just had up
They-
to
they-
Isaiah, you want?
Right, because then after that, that's when Isaiah and Jeremiah, and then they left.
So like up to here?
Anything after that in our Old Testament, they wouldn't have had. That all happened after they left. But God gave them revelations directly,
Which
and those
was
were
it?
written on what plates?
So they had all of this.
Right, but not that.
But not this
that
section.
And where did they write theirs? On which plates?
Of Nephi?
The plates. That's what became the plates of Nephi. The revelation. So we got the record of Malachi in the Old Testament, but God gave revelation to Nephi and his family, and they received revelations on the plates of Nephi to cover that period of time. And we have those teachings today in the Book of Mormon. Very good, guys. Nice job. Was that good, Alyssa? Nice.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give us a huge thumbs up, turn on notifications, and check out this
Click that
first
subscribe
video.
button 7 times.
Wow.